Hi everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Stellium Astrology podcast. This is episode 45 and I'm Stephanie James, your host. I can't believe we're at episode 45. It's quite a lot of episodes that I've managed to get down for you guys, and I'm pretty sure that most of you who've been listening on a regular basis will know that I am pregnant and getting quite close to the end of my pregnancy. So I've been preparing some other recordings as well to sort of buy myself some time and hopefully be able to put some stuff out for you while I'm on my fourth trimester maternity leave period. Fourth trimester being basically that period of complete chaos where you don't really know what the hell is going on. You don't know what time of day it is, and as far as I'm aware, I'm just going to be basically a cow who is here to feed a very demanding little baby who will just need me to cuddle him, feed him and wipe his bum. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to meeting him, looking forward to hugging him. Not sure about all the other stuff, like the pooping and the other icky stuff. I guess that's just what I signed up for really, isn't it? So but anyway, I have managed to do a little bit of an audit on some of the shows that I've already done, and to see whether or not I've actually skipped people who've signed up to have their chart read, because in my head I'm like, yeah, I've read everybody's chart, and then when I'm going back over it I'm like, gosh, I've missed a few people. So I'm definitely going to go back and cover some of the charts that I haven't covered so far. And today I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about Anglar houses, Succeedent houses and Cadent houses. Now, this is it's not really my the biggest deal for me when it comes to reading charts. I know other people are much more into it. I think it's a more traditional way if you're into traditional astrology, which is kind of really old school way of doing astrology. And don't get me wrong, I've got practitioner level certificates from the traditional school of astrology, or school of traditional astrology, where I studied with Deborah Holding. And I actually I know that one of their tutors, who's really fantastic, Wade Caves, Wade and I had a conversation a little while ago. It's going to be coming out in a few weeks for you guys to listen to, and he actually recorded some bonus content for my patrons about the houses as well. So that should hopefully give you a really good understanding of some of the discussions around houses. And yeah, Wade is a really interesting and fun astrologer as well, and just very, very I get real academic vibes from him. I'm not a very academic person. I'm kind of more of an arty kind of person rather than, I'm more intuitive and creative and arty rather than digital, academic and analytical as such. And it takes all sorts and lots of different approaches. If you're listening to this podcast, you're probably more my vibe, but you may find other astrologers who vibe with you more than I do through this podcast or through your exploration. But yeah, so today I wanted to just talk a little bit about the Anglar, Succeedent and Cadent houses. Now, the houses in the natal chart, we have 12 houses, starting off at the ascendant and the first house, and then moving all the way round, and then you get to the cusp of the sort of like the third, fourth house cusp, where you have the fourth house cusp is the beginning of the it's the IC, not always, but depending on the house system that you use. The fourth house cusp usually coincides with the IC. And then moving along to the seventh house cusp, which is the descendant, and then around again to the 10th house cusp, which is the midheaven. Now, interestingly as well, that in this other approach of looking at the houses, another way of grouping the houses, and by the way, I would highly recommend that you guys check out a book called The 12 Houses by Howard Susportus. He's when you're looking at the houses, this is kind of almost a textbook that you just have to have, and I'm not joking, my one is really honestly falling to bits. I've said this before, and I think I got it from Amazon or something, probably second hand, and there's a whole chunk of the book that just comes out completely. and it's covered in my scribbles and my post-it notes, because I never used to be able to. I wanted to keep my books really like pristine, but I've grown to realise that, you know, you just need to, for me, I just need to take notes in the books, and it's just the way I am. I've kind of evolved, and now I've got like books with highlighted sections, and I kind of like it. I like the colour. I like going in and seeing the notes that I've made, and I love buying second-hand books and seeing what other people have written as well. So this was a second-hand book, and there's a phone number written in the front of this book as well. Sometimes I'm like, oh, I should ring that number. But anyway, I'm digressing. Stop me from digressing, please. So yeah, I'm just opening it up on the, there's a whole chapter on grouping the houses. Now, we did do an episode where we looked at like, you know, the different types of sort of like looking at the southern hemisphere, the northern hemisphere, and then breaking the houses up into quadrants, and then you can break them up into sort of thirds. So let's have a look. So in this book it says the personal houses are houses 1 to 6, the collective houses are houses 7 to 12, and then you've got the quadrants, the first quadrant being from the ascendant to the 4th house, which is self-development, and then from the 4th house to the 7th house being self-expression, and then from the 7th house to the 10th house, self-expansion, and then the 10th house all the way back round to the 1st house again, to the end of the 12th house, which is self-transcendence. So it's really interesting to look at these things. And then if you break it up, so it's into thirds, so houses 1 to 4 is personal, 5 to 8 is social, and then 9 to 12 is universal. So it's really interesting just to do that. But also in this chapter, it does talk about the Anglar, Succeedent and Cadent houses, which are traditionally classified according to whether they are Anglar, Succeedent or Cadent. So like I said, it's a traditional system, and it's a quadrant system of house division. So the angular houses, the clue's in the name, they are angular. So they line up really with the angles. So if you're using a house system like Placidus or any of the house systems where the 10th house cusp is attached to the midheaven and IC, so that's the beginning of your 10th house and your 4th house, which a lot of people use, then your angular houses will be attached to literally to the AC, DC, MC, IC axis. However, if you're using equal house system, then which is generally what I tend to use for most things in astrology, then the houses will be divided like a hot cross. You start off like a hot cross bun, and that's your ascendant descendant. It's almost like perfectly divided, and then you've got each slice of your pizza or your cake divided into 12 equal chunks, all of them starting at the exact same degree. So your midheaven, like for example, my midheaven happens to be in, it falls using equal house system in my 8th house in Aquarius, and then my 10th house cusp starts at 17 of, what sign? Pisces, I think. Yeah. So basically I've got like a 17 degree Gemini ascendant and a 17 degree Pisces midheaven. So that is kind of how it's divided up if you're using equal. So just for argument's sake, let's say we're doing equal house for now, or you know, let's just say that the midheaven and IC line up with it. Basically those houses are going to be your angular houses, and these angular houses happen to be the ones that are linked to action, and they kind of connect with the cardinal signs or the cardinal principles in astrology, which are the Aries, Cancer, Libra, Capricorn signs, which if you remember back to when I did all of those shows, Aries, Cancer, Libra and Capricorn are all of the signs of the zodiac which happen to be attached to the solstices or the equinoxes. So Aries is the spring equinox, Cancer season is when we go into the summer solstice, Libra is the autumn equinox, and Capricorn is the winter solstice. These signs are also kind of like action signs where they kind of take the lead. So if you've got a lot of planets that happen to be in a house which is angular, you are going to be more likely to get things done and sort of take initiative and just get things going, basically. So let's have a quick look and see what else. There's lots of diagrams in this book as well. So on page 112, it shows you the angular houses, a little diagram. And it also talks about like the challenges between each of the houses. So for example, the oppositions between the first and the seventh house, and the kind of the difficulty you have between independence and cooperation. The fourth and the 10th being the wanting to balance, almost like the work and home life balance that we always used to refer to a lot. I know in UK anyway. And also the squares between them. So, the first and fourth square, the square being the 90-degree angle, which is very dynamic and challenging. And then, like the relationship between these houses. So, the first house being your own independent identity and the way that you look at the world versus who you are in a family, how your family nurtures that ability for you to be able to express yourself as an individual. And then maybe the fourth to the seventh square is perhaps the influence of family and perhaps relationships with parents and how that affects your relationships when you're going out into the world and looking for a partner, for example. So it's very interesting to see how the houses work together. The next ones along are the Succeedent houses, and the Succeedent houses are the 2nd, 5th, 8th and 11th houses, and they kind of have a fixed energy about them, just like the fixed signs, so Taurus, Leo, Scorpio and Aquarius, and they're obviously much more grounded and stable and consistent, which is I suppose that they're a bit slower because they're fixed. They're not as fast moving as the dynamic cardinal signs, or the angular houses. So when you have a lot of planets that happen to be in a Succeedent house, you're probably going to take a bit more time over things, and be a bit more cautious about how you go about things. So this doesn't matter, like even if you had Aries on your 2nd house cusp, it's still going to be it's still going to be a Succeedent house. So even though you might have that Aries getting it done type of independent type of energy about you, if you had a lot of planets in Aries in your 2nd house cusp, it's still going to have a slower and more considered approach to how it goes about its affairs, particularly around money and that type of thing. So exercising greater caution, building on what you've already got, really the foundations that you've already laid, and having a good kind of sense of staying power, and kind of committing to whatever it is that you've decided to sign up for. And again, you have like these different oppositions. So if you think about the housing oppositions that I had when we talked about the houses, and I said like the 2nd and the 8th house was a bit like building and destruction. There's a lot of other things. In this book here, the Howard to Sporters book, it says conflicts arise between what one person possesses and values versus what person holds dear. Gosh, if you've ever had to move in with somebody and you've had to like chuck out a load of stuff so that you can all fit into the same house together, the arguments that arise over things, the things that you would normally probably we collect a lot of stuff in our lifetime, and these two houses, the 2nd and the 8th, I would have to say I really associate as the houses of hoarding. If you think about that kind of retentive energy, that is a very Succeedent type of essence. And so it also, if you think about the types of the time of the year with the seasons, with the angular, it's like the instigation of like the new season, and the Succeedent houses are much more about when we're embedded in the center of that season. So we when you're in Taurus season, for example, and things definitely start to warm up, the days start to get lighter in the northern hemisphere anyway, and you really start to get a sense that things are changing for the better, but there's a sense of consistency about the time of the season that you're in. So it doesn't feel so bleak and changeable. It's definitely much more here to stay, and you can kind of make plans and think about how you want to go about things. And definitely as we're coming out of this pandemic, well, I say coming out of it, it's still very much a thing, but as things are definitely shifting and changing, it's much easier for us to have that kind of outlook and think, I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to achieve this, I want to achieve that. And we can only do that if we know that things aren't going to be so mutable and so changeable. So that fixity, that succeedent quality, is kind of, it fits with that kind of energy, really. And in the Howard Sporter's book, he says stabilizing and concretizing energy. So it really is a kind of areas of manifestation, really, and places where we can really allow things to take hold and really develop. So if you've got a lot of planets in your 2nd, 5th, 8th or 11th, definitely think about that in the context of your what you set out to do. What are your goals usually, and how do you feel that you've achieved something, or how do you feel satisfied that something is really taking the course that you kind of intended? I know for myself, I have lots of planets in Aquarius, and I have a few planets in Scorpio as well. So aside from the mutability I have in my chart, which is a fair amount, and a little bit of cardinality, I do have a lot of fixity, and my Aquarius stuff happens to be in the 8th house along with my sun as well. So for me, I can commit to things. There is this like ability to sort of go with things and sort of like see them through. And for me, it's about producing results. If I don't produce results, if I don't see that there's something building up and I've got like a body of work behind it, it feels almost like a waste of time. It's like that sort of having something to show for the effort that you've made. Whereas some people are quite happy to just be working on lots of projects. I'm thinking of a particular Pisces I know, lots of fingers in lots of pies, working on lots of projects, but not really having anything to show for it at the end. But they don't mind not having anything to show for it. It's about the experience as opposed to the product almost. So yeah, moving on, we have Cadent Houses. And Howard Sporter says this is distributing, readjusting and reorientating energy. That's a great little pithy sentence to sort of describe how mutability works, really, because these are the mutable houses. So we're going from the 3rd, the 6th, the 9th and the 12th. So that's kind of associated with Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius and Pisces. And these are the hardest houses to kind of really get into as well. They, in essence, when writing horoscopes, if you ever had a month where stuff was falling in the 3rd, 6th, 9th or 12th for any of the signs, it would be like, oh, what do I write about? Because it's just really hard to kind of convey that sense of movement in a way that can almost be productive for the person reading the horoscope. But yeah, so the Cadent houses are again, they're the kind of associated with the shift in the seasons where things really are moving again and changing. So, when you're going from spring to summer, that's kind of Gemini season. And then you've got that back to school vibe with Virgo in September, when things are cooling down a bit, but it's not quite. I mean, sometimes it is really boiling hot in September, isn't it? But it definitely feels like there's a shift, and you really notice that change. And then the 9th house, it's going from that autumn to winter feel, and then from the 12th house, that Pisces time, when we're going from the end of the winter to the beginning of spring. So it's that shift between the weather kind of shifting. And if you think about it on a planetary sense, the Earth is constantly wobbling as it's orbiting the sun. It's moving backwards and forwards on its axis, and it has a 23.5 degree axis that it moves backwards and forwards on. So it's constantly doing this little wiggle. So when the northern hemisphere's got its winter, the southern hemisphere's got its summer, and vice versa. So yeah, we're not just spinning around, we're also wobbling and then orbiting the sun as well. And so the seasons are a product of this movement, and the houses in the horoscope, which are associated with the different seasons, if you're dividing it up that way, describe the change that we experience as inhabitants of this planet whilst we're going about our daily life. And so we can look at it and go, oh, it's cold winter, oh, can't deal with it, or so many leaves everywhere, it's really damp, I love the leaves, I love the changing colours of the autumn, but also I don't like the dampness. It's like getting to my bones. So it's it personalises the seasons for you in your own personal chart, and you can associate to seasons that you're experiencing as well, particularly when the sun moves through certain times of your chart or certain houses, and certain signs. It shows that there's always going to be this high energy area in the heat in the summer, when we're all kind of a bit more active and out there, and the more low energy, power down system reboot of winter. And you can find that looking at your chart just by finding where you've got Leo season, Cancer season for sort of the summer months, or when you've got Capricorn season and Aquarius season, which are just like the cold hibernation periods, really. When you're in a cadent house, it definitely is a shift. It's a movable kind of fluidity, which kind of describes movement all the time. And so if you've got like lots of planets in cadent houses, then you tend to be a bit more of a go with the flow person. You could be almost a bit more tidal, really. Not tidal in a kind of Cancerian lunar way, I would say, but more tidal in a Piscean, just that very mutable sense of chopping and changing. There's always like a polarity or bipolarity with Gemini. There's always a option, variety, choices, crossroads, and it's just where you can be highly flexible and adaptable. So, these all have their positives, just like you've got the mutable signs, the cardinal signs, and the fixed signs. They've all got their strengths and they've got weaknesses as well. But it will give you that added dimension when looking at your chart. You could be an incredibly fixed person who has loads of fixed planets in certain signs, but in, like, say for example Taurus, but then you've got Taurus on the 12th house cusp, which is extremely fluid house. And then think about like all the planets you might have in Taurus stuck in that house. It adds a sense of fluidity, it adds a sense of adaptability. So you're not completely stuck in the mud, Taurus. So hopefully that you found it interesting. Usually if you have like a lot of planets or the same amount of planets in two different house types, one more than the other might stand out depending on which planets are involved. So particularly if like the more generational transpersonal planets like Uranus, Neptune and Pluto, or like say people with the Capricorn stellium, for example, those ones kind of born in and around sort of between 1988 to about 94, 95, who've got those strong Capricorn stelliums. If you've got Uranus and Neptune in that stellium, and Saturn, for example, and that's all you've got, then it may not be so obvious and so loud. Whereas if you've got Sun, Moon, and a personal planet, and then maybe Jupiter or something like that in a different house, that house may be louder because the types of planets that are in there, they're illuminating, they're much more personal, and they're much more quicker to connect with on a personal level as opposed to the transpersonal planets. So have a look at your chart and see whether they fall in angular, succedent, or cadent houses, and then think about that added dimension of those planets and how you connect with them. I find it very interesting to always be looking at different types of different, like the different levels, the different layers of astrology. And remember, with the houses and planets in houses, like I've described before, it's a bit like a pizza topping where you're going to have spicier or more flavourful toppings or slices if you've got a bunch that have just clustered up in one area, as opposed to if it's all equally distributed. You'd have a bit more of an equal, overwhelming bite into a slice of pizza if all of the toppings have been equally distributed. But if you've got one that's just got like a cluster of toppings and some of them are really spicy, you might take a bite of that and really regret it and have to take a bit more time to eat it because it's going to blow your head off. And it's a little bit like that with the planets in the houses. The ones with more toppings are going to be more obvious. And now you can look at it with that added dimension of, is it angular, succedent or cadent? And, does this contradict, a cluster of planets in another area that is, perhaps not the same? So say you've got some in a cadent house and then you've got some in a succedent house, how that conflicts with each other. It's just very interesting. So I would recommend that you check that out, The 12 Houses by Howard Portis. And somebody who I haven't looked at their chart and I've overlooked, and I do apologise, is Abby. So Abby has submitted her chart. She submitted it quite a while ago. She's in Columbia, Tennessee, or she was at the time she was born. And she happens to have, let's have a look. So she is in equal house, which is how I've divided up her chart. She's got her Sun, Mercury, Venus, Midheaven and Mars all sitting in her 10th house, which is an angular house. And they're all in, her sun's in Leo, but the rest's in Virgo. And then she has a few planets. So let's see. She's got Uranus and Neptune and Lilith and her north node, all sitting in Capricorn in her 2nd house. So she has the angular quality of getting stuff done, but her sun's in a fixed sign. So you might think that actually, because her sun in Leo is fixed, that 10th house positioning of the sun, might describe that people see her as slow and considered about how she does something. But actually with that, 1, 2, 3, 4 planets sitting up there in her 10th house cusp, and 10th house, the angular house. And also we might just bring Jupiter into it as well, because her Jupiter happens to be only 2 degrees away in Leo from the sun as well, and very close to the 10th house cusp. So we would bring that into the 10th house as well. Having 5 planets sitting there in that angular house adds a sense of dynamism and action about those planets. So even though she's got a fixed and mutable combination up there, which is flexible, adaptable and consistent and reliable at the same time, she's also got the ability to be action orientated, take charge and make decisions that others might shy away from because they don't want to put themselves in a position where they are seen to be taking the first step towards something that could be the right or wrong choice, for example. And yes, we've also got down here, so actually her moon is right on the cusp of the 2nd house using equal division. And then you've got Uranus, Lilith, Neptune, North Node, all sitting in the 2nd. Now, like I said, those Uranus and Neptune are transpersonal, so they're not particularly personal planets. So they have more of a generational feel. She has Lilith in there, which is, I always hesitate to include Lilith in an interpretation. I don't usually put Lilith in a stellium as such unless it's very prominently placed with the sun or something like that. And the North Node and South Node, again, Lilith and the North Node and South Node, they're calculated points. They're not physical bodies travelling through space. So they still have a poignant presence. There's still something to explore astrologically. But again, they're not planetary bodies. So I would not hover on that too long. And the moon being on the 2nd house cusp in Sagittarius brings it into the 2nd house, really. So you could stick that in there and say that it makes that a bit more personalised, adds a bit of weight to that 2nd house with that cluster. So, the 2nd house being a succeedent house, which is a stabilising and concretising energy, could be that she has got this quality about her that has staying power. The moon definitely needs to have some kind of consistency, even though it's a mutable moon in Sagittarius. It has the ability to draw, to attract, and to build foundations and to produce some kind of results. However, that moon will require flexibility in its ability to do so. It will require freedom in order to do this. But as long as she gets the freedom and is able to have the experience she needs in order to bring that area of her life together, that flexibility, that understanding almost with the 2nd house principle, there's a sense of, with the moon in the 2nd house, there is a sense of ebb and flow anyway about financial situations, for example. there has to be a flexibility about understanding that money cometh and money goeth. And usually with a Saggy moon, for example, or maybe like a moon in Pisces or a moon Neptune conjunction in the second, there is this understanding of like maybe like a karmic cash pot where, you know, you give a little and you get a little, and it's kind of like an energy exchange as opposed to like a hard tangible cash situation where you have to hoard as much money as possible. There's a bit of ebb and flow about it. So it's interesting to look at the chart on a different level like that. So thanks to Abby, and I'm so sorry it's taken me ages to get round to looking at your chart, but I just wanted to do a short episode today on this area because it kind of reiterates some of the principles we've already discussed in the with the what do you call it, the elements, the modes, sorry, so the kind of the mutable, fixed and come on brain, mutable, fixed and cardinal signs. It fits very nicely with that. And like I said in those episodes, when you draw a square and you place the square, an equilateral square, or can't even remember, my brain is so fried at the moment. It's baby brain. I'm allowed to be forgetful. Either way, an equilateral square, I'm going to call it. Basically, if you place it over the chart, for example, with the first point of the square being in the first house, then all the houses that are going to sit on the points are going to be angular houses. And it's the same if you move it around to the succedent and the cadence as well. If you have used a different house system like Placidus, it's going to be slightly different. It's still going to be interesting and fun to explore. And like I've said, probably misquoted Frank Clifford about a zillion times, with a good vocabulary, good knowledge and vocabulary, all roads can lead to Rome. And I think that goes for house systems, methods, and everything in astrology. Usually things appear in the horoscope. They tend to get repeated. It's something that kind of appears. If you see something appearing 3 times, something that echoes the same message 3 times, it's there. It's part of that person's personality. So thank you, Abby, once again for submitting your chart. I'm sure we'll have a look at it again at some point. Just to remind you guys that I am going to be relaunching the podcast on YouTube. And I've decided that I'm going to get a honeycomb collective diary for whoever happens to be pulled out of a hat. And all you need to do to go into the draw is literally sign up on YouTube subscribe to my YouTube channel. So I'll put a little link down there for you. I may have an additional prize. I haven't decided yet. I think I probably will. And the additional prize is probably going to be to get a reading with me, most likely. So, if you'd like to be up for getting a reading with me, winning a reading with me, or, getting a honeycomb collective diary, which is awesome, by the way, and I have one myself and I absolutely love it. And I did record an episode for my Patreons on my birthday presents, which I can include a link to the blog post as well. Get on board, sign up to my YouTube channel. I have noticed a few people have signed up to my YouTube channel and it says that they're private, so I can't see who they are. So if you happen to know you have a private YouTube channel and you have signed up to me, you can email me a screenshot showing that to Stephanie, Stefanie, at stelliumastrology.com. And if you'd like to have your chart featured on this show, all you have to do is sign up to the mailing list at my website, stelliumastrology.com, and you'll get a form to complete, a button that you click on to take you to a form to complete in the welcome email as well. Okay, lovely. All right, you guys take care, and I will speak to you next time. Thanks a lot for listening. Goodbye.